Welcome to Shadow of History, mysterious, dark, and untold stories from world history. Today, we venture into an alternate timeline and explore a fascinating question. What if the Black Death never happened? The Black Death, one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, reshaped Europe in the 14th century, claiming millions of lives and altering the course of history forever. But what if this catastrophic event never occurred? How might history have unfolded differently? Let's dive into this alternate reality and imagine a world where the Black Death never struck. The Black Death, which devastated Europe between 1347 and 1351, killed an estimated 25 to 30 million people, about one-third of Europe's population at the time. The plague, likely caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis and transmitted by fleas on rats, left entire communities decimated. The effects were felt on nearly every aspect of life. Social structures were forever altered, economies were shattered, and the religious and political landscape was dramatically changed. It was a turning point in European history, a seismic event that ushered in a new era. But what if it had never happened? Without the Black Death, Europe's population would have grown steadily throughout the 14th and 15th centuries. Urbanization would likely have continued, with cities expanding at a much faster rate. Places like Florence, Venice, and Paris, which were already bustling with activity, might have continued their growth without the devastating losses the plague caused. But with more people, resources would have become more strained, and it's possible that cities would have faced overcrowding, famine, and unrest, potentially triggering different forms of social and political instability. The labor shortage caused by the Black Death, which led to a major rise in wages and power for peasants, might never have happened. Without the catastrophic loss of life, serfs and workers would not have been in as high demand, and the feudal system might have remained more rigid. The growing mobility that allowed peasants to demand better conditions might have been delayed or prevented entirely. Feudalism could have persisted longer, and the early stages of the Renaissance might have unfolded at a slower pace. The Black Death accelerated the shift from feudalism to a more market-driven economy. Without it, economic growth might have been much more gradual. In terms of economics, the labor force would have remained larger without the plague, and many of the disruptions to trade and agriculture would have been less severe. The severe scarcity of workers after the Black Death encouraged technological advancements in farming and trade, which may have been slower to develop without the crisis. It's possible that the medieval economy would have remained more dependent on traditional practices for a longer period of time, with fewer incentives to innovate. One of the greatest social changes that followed the Black Death was the shift in religious power. The Catholic Church, which had been a dominant force in Europe, lost much of its authority after failing to provide solace or explanations for the plague. The Church's inability to prevent or even explain the death toll led many people to question their faith and the clergy's role in their lives. Without the Black Death, the Catholic Church might have maintained its strong influence on European society for a much longer period, potentially delaying the Reformation. The rise of dissenting religious movements might have been slowed, and the Protestant Reformation may not have gained the momentum it did in the 16th century. Socially, without the shock of the Black Death, the structure of medieval European society could have remained more rigid. The sudden and extreme loss of life prompted changes in social mobility, with the lower classes gaining more freedom and influence in a society that was otherwise tightly controlled by the aristocracy. The rise of a middle class, which could purchase land and become more integrated into the political system, was an effect of the plague that might have been much more gradual without it. Another consequence of the Black Death was the decline of the Byzantine Empire. The plague weakened the Byzantine Empire, and its decline made it more vulnerable to the Ottoman Empire. If the Black Death had not occurred, it's possible that the Byzantine Empire could have held on longer and resisted the Ottoman invasion. This could have delayed the fall of Constantinople in 1453 and changed the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. The Ottomans might have faced greater challenges in expanding into Europe, and the power dynamics in the Middle East and Europe could have unfolded very differently. The Black Death also played a role in disrupting the trade routes that were essential for Europe's economy. While the pandemic certainly halted trade for a time, the subsequent recovery of Europe led to the establishment of new trade routes and the expansion of markets. Without the Black Death, these routes might have developed more slowly, and the age of exploration might have been delayed. The drive to find new trade routes and resources, which was partly fueled by the population recovery after the plague, could have taken much longer to manifest. The effects of the Black Death on the arts, sciences, and philosophy were profound. The intellectual vacuum left by the collapse of medieval structures allowed for new ideas to flourish, leading to the Renaissance. Without the devastation of the plague, the intellectual upheaval that spurred the Renaissance might not have occurred in the same way. The emergence of new ideas, the questioning of authority, and the rediscovery of classical learning might have been delayed or occurred in a different manner. The military landscape of Europe also would have been affected. The power vacuum left by the death of so many soldiers allowed for the rise of new powers, and the Black Death weakened many of Europe's kingdoms. Without the plague, the political and military struggles of the period might have unfolded more slowly, potentially leading to a longer period of medieval conflict and fewer advancements in military technology and tactics. The Black Death accelerated the end of the medieval period and ushered in new political and military developments. Without the Black Death, the world might have seen a Europe that was more populous, more rigidly hierarchical, and slower to innovate in terms of economics, science, and art. The rapid expansion of European power that followed the plague might have been less pronounced, and the path to modernity would have been much slower and more drawn out. But there's another key aspect to consider: the impact on the non-European world. The spread of the Black Death to Asia and North Africa had devastating consequences, but it also spurred major changes in the way nations interacted. The aftermath of the plague saw increased trade, exploration, and the exchange of ideas. Without the Black Death, the global connections that emerged in the late Middle Ages might have been delayed, which could have affected the development of early global trade networks. The Black Death, though tragic and horrifying, was a turning point in human history. Without it, the world might have followed a very different path, one that could have seen a slower transition to the modern era, with political and social systems that retained more of the old medieval structure. The absence of the Black Death would have meant fewer shifts in power and control, less pressure to innovate, and perhaps a much different geopolitical landscape. Thank you for joining us as we explored the alternate timeline of a world without the Black Death. If you found this speculative journey intriguing, make sure to subscribe to Shadow of History for more mysterious, dark, and untold stories from the past. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Until next time, stay curious and continue uncovering the untold stories that have shaped our world.